all this footage and stuff to the masses so that they can person do it. It turns out that that theory was correct. Super Mario Bros. Wonder had a playable demo at Nintendo Live. It's not officially a part of PAX West in Seattle, but it's a walk-in building. It's the convention center. You know, there were sci-fi stuff. I really wanted to go to PAX West. I was worried that I wouldn't be able to.
Is there a way to know what damage type weapons deal?
My neck was still screwed up, and I wasn't really sure if I could do that much driving, if I could do that much walking around, and be upright that much of the day. But I have been getting better. Like these last couple weeks have been really, really good, by the way. Just an update. Getting better. Things are looking way, way, way better. Still don't know exactly what happened. Maybe it was a sprain. I'm not exactly sure. But it's been getting better. And I took the risk. I decided
I guess we just have to guess.
really wanted to go to PAX, and I did, and it turned out pretty darn. I'll go more into the details about my overall PAX experience and also Nintendo Live itself in a different video. But long story short, for this video, I got to go to Nintendo Live. Yo Schiller, editor extraordinaire, got me in, and I got to play Super Mario Bros. Wonder. And like they knew people were gonna want to get their hands on this, so they had like a million demo stations, humongous corner of the room. And, you know, it's a 4-player game, so they got a lot of people in at a time. So the line went really fast, so I actually got to play it multiple times. Got a pretty good amount of time for the demo. And what do you say? Talk about it. What do you say? I get my little impressions. So, like, overall, like, it plays like Mario. I think that it's not really surprising, you know. You look at the footage, like, this is a Mario game. You know, it largely plays like pretty much any Mario, like your Mario Bros. Games. Sure. But like it is
I believe the damage animations can tell me. So
although I will say one
spheres are strike damage.
Compared to Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, this time it doesn't do that thing where you twirl in midair when you hit the dash button when you're midair and you spin and you miss the thing that you're trying to land on. And apparently there was a way to change it, but you had to do like some secret menu thing. Annoyed the heck out of me. Not a thing here. You can press that dash button all you want. It doesn't make you midair twirl. So that's good. That was my like immediate impression. The second I picked it up, it's just like, oh thank goodness. Oh thank goodness that I was doing that. So that's a smaller detail that stood out. Let's talk about the other stuff that really stands out. First is the visuals. Now, since the game was revealed, I've been going on and on and on about the visuals. It's basically like my favorite thing about Mario Wonder is just how cool it looks, how weird and creative and like just like kind of smooth. And I don't know, the art style is incredible. It seems like it's a bit of a departure for Mario. It's a little bit more weird and stylized than usual, which is great because Mario has had this weird kind of like sanitized feel to him for a while. So that's good. But spending time with the game itself made a bigger difference than I expected because, you know, in trailer footage and stuff, it's a lot of very quick clips. You know, the clips are going by very fast, the characters are moving very fast, but actually looking at it and getting the controller in your hands and being able to take the time to appreciate the visuals at your own pace, even like, you know, just kind of standing there for a few moments at a time if you want to, like, my appreciation has risen to a whole new level. Previously, I was focusing a lot on, like, backgrounds and stuff, but this time it's, like, it's the foreground elements. It's, things like the trees and the rocks. Like, basically, a lot of the game, like, it's got a lot of different styles mixed in, but a lot of it, it's got this, like, this almost clay-like, kind of toy-like, kind of clay-like, sort of a texture to it. You know, it's the way the lighting, it's the way the light bounces off of it. It feels like a clay model sometimes. And I'm a massive fan of anything like that. Anything that just kind of, it's something about clay. I was really into stop motion when I was a kid. I'm still a really huge fan of it. So anything that has that, like, kind of realistic texture. If it's, like, too shiny and smooth, it looks like a plastic toy. I'm not quite as into it. But clay. And a lot of these visual elements just have that. And, like, I don't know, just being able to take the time to look at it and kind of drink it in. I love it. I love it so much for Mario. It's so fun and interesting to look at. I cannot get over it. I will say, though, playing this demo, really, I mean, I already want a better Switch. Just a system that can play these games at a higher resolution. I already want that, but my gosh, playing this game, and I can see that the visuals are so beautiful, and playing it on this giant TV, so smudgy, so it's not outputting at a high enough resolution to do the visuals justice, to give them what they deserve. So that's another small thing, but it did stand out to me. Like, it looked great, but gosh, it could look so much better. So other little details, this demo lets you kind of move around the world map, so you get a little bit of a taste of going from like the linear level to level, but then like take a little thing and ride over to a little open area where you can walk around and do levels and challenges kind of in whatever order you want. And this really was only a tiny taste of the map, and we don't know how the map is actually going to be in the full game. This is kind of like a demo version. But I really, really love what I have seen so far of the map. Visually, it's just like the camera is really dynamic, it's really pretty, and then like the switching back and forth between the linear and the non-linear. It's just a lot of fun. There's even one part of the demo where you walk up and the way is blocked by like a rock, and I don't know how we're going to put that rock in the full version, but I just like these little things that actually make it kind of feel like you're adventuring through the world, and you're not just, that's my thing. I don't like just feeling like I'm picking levels on a map. I want to feel like that map is real. I want more fun, interactive elements and secrets and things on the map itself. And so, yeah, it was only a little bit of a taste, but I really liked what I saw, and it's giving me a lot higher hopes for just a more fun map, And of course, it's really fun how you've got regular levels, and then you've got these little challenge levels, these things where you use, a new badge to do a little challenge. Using the badge usually gives you a new move or something, and then if you beat it, then you get to get out the badge. And this one, it was for a wall jump challenge. So, yeah, it's already just amazing because it's gameplay variety, in between regular levels you get that one little challenge. That's just fun. But I have to segue now into badges. I freaked out about badges, the Direct talked about how it's a total game changer, and my opinion on that has not changed. It has in fact strengthened even more. The challenge level in here, the badge that you get, I didn't even know this was a thing. Maybe it was probably in the Direct, and I just didn't pay close attention. But actually playing it, you jump. I think it's so cool. It's like a Mega Man badge. It's when you do a wall jump, instead of jumping away from the wall, you jump straight up, so you can then land on the platform that you can wall jumping off of. And that's crazy. That's just a crazy thing for Mario to have. I guess it's kind of a small thing, but it's kind of not. I don't know. It's kind of major. It majorly changes the way that Mario and whatever character they potentially move around. And it's like I keep saying, I just feel like these badges are going to make all the difference when it comes to I can't wait to see the speedrunning scene and just see how levels are optimized and what badge you use in any given scenario, and maybe how some of these badges are exploited in places that they weren't really planned to be exploited. It's very exciting. And just seeing that badge there, I'm just like, oh my gosh, what other crazy badges are there going to be? I'm so excited by that. I don't know. I've played a bunch of Mario games, we've played a lot of Mario games.
Once I just realized I
wall
can't do
and
that.
jumping straight up, it's just like, no, that's something I've never done before. I just think it's cool. And then Man Oh Man. So, only played a handful of levels. Presumably these are levels that are just the early part of the game. But wowie zowie even. The level design so far is so good. It's so I am not, I'm not as familiar with 2D Marios as I could be. I have played them. I've played plenty of them. I haven't played all the new Super Mario Brothers games, so I'm not sure. I feel like this is more interactive, like the levels themselves. And it's kind of like what I was talking about in my Direct video, how you get these abilities and they let you interact with the environment so much. You get the drill hat, and there's like a million different things where, you drill over here and get to this secret area, and then turning into an elephant, there's all these different things. Water you can suck up and squirt. You can break blocks all over the place, and it drastically changes just how you're moving through the level. And I don't know, I guess I'm not 100% sure if that is the difference much that you can do. These levels were crafted with so many fun little ways to just do stuff. And then the wonder effects themselves, how, like in each level you get the wonder flower and then something weird happens. That's this game's thing. But they are using these things, these wonder elements in such amazing ways. You probably saw in the trailer and the direct level where you get the wonder flower, all these dinosaur bulls or whatever, they stampede. But I was just amazed by how many different ways these were used. You can use you can be on top of them and use them to collect stuff, and there's some stuff that you can miss if you're not fast enough. You can kind of break away from them if you want, but I don't know, you gotta follow their trajectory. And then even before the wonder effect, even just the level design itself, this level has these little rampaging dino bulls or whatever, and coaxing them into breaking the right blocks in order to get stuff. I don't know, it's just, the level design is really good so far, is all I'm saying. I guess that's what I'm saying. These levels are so dense. They're so incredibly dense. There's plenty of levels where they'll give you the concept, like in the old games, they'll give you the concept and kind of run with it a little bit, kind of develop it a little, and then kind of twist it again. This just, it feels like you spend a lot less time just kind of playing. Okay, you're just kind of going, oh, so that's what this is about. You just kind of, okay. It's so much more hands-on now. It's so much more oh, this is what we're doing. Oh my gosh, we gotta use this element here to do this. We gotta use this power up here. We gotta use this enemy in order to accomplish this. Yeah, I don't know. I guess the best way I can put it is just dense. It just feels really dense. There's always something new. And of course, the really, really cool thing about this game that I'm loving so far, and it's gonna make it just so incredibly good for that first playthrough, is that it's an element of randomness. And the wonder effects. That's a thing right there. You get the flower, you never know what's gonna happen. But then, the levels themselves are this way too. You've got these, little flowers, and whenever you touch one of the flowers, something will just happen. A little thing goes out, and it'll just make coins appear, or something. It's something small, but it's always something. And sometimes you gotta, use water to give the water, and then they bloom, and then there's a little thing that happens. It's just everywhere you go, there are little random elements, whether it's these little flowers or it's the big wonder flowers. The whole game is just filled with surprises. Just the levels, they bend and they shift, surprising stuff happens just around every corner. And that, oh my gosh, even just playing this demo, it was such a delight just to see what the next level was, to see what the next section of the level was. So overall, if you couldn't tell, I had a lot of fun. I think Super Mario Bros. Wonder is going to be incredible, and as always, I will remind you, I'm not a big 2D platformer guy. I'm not big on 2D Mario at all, and I feel like Nintendo has been I guess I can't say dropping the ball, because the games do sell very well, but at least from a creative standpoint, Mario could be so much more, and you have all these other games and developers just really raising the bar, Tropical Freeze comes out, and Retro Studios is okay, you're
up here is the entrance to the next floor.
Just been waiting for 2D Mario to come out, just being this is what a modern 2D platform can be, a modern 2D Mario can be, and this really does feel like it is them finally doing it. This is not a bare bones sequel. This is not a paint by numbers Mario. This is something really special. This is something that you can feel is being just expertly crafted. Every little bit of it, there's so much care and passion and just fun and creativity. And looks really good. And after I played it, they gave you a little keychain, a little Elephant Mario keychain. Actually, each time I played it, they gave me an Elephant Mario keychain. I guess everyone got one, which is great, because I got to give one to each of my two. So those are my hands-on impressions of Super Mario Bros. Wonder. I can say with great confidence, after finally getting my hands on the game, yes, Marlo is still excited.
Nice.
That is the thing. That is the reality. If you happen to be at Nintendo Live and you got to play the demo, I would love it if you would go down in the comments and tell everyone what you thought about it as well. Really curious to know what everybody else thinks. Even though I
I've
still basically
leveled up so much now that the normal enemies are actually back to being
Thank you for watching.
completely
Stay tuned
trivial
for
now
another
again.
video that'll be all about Nintendo Live. Probably some little
And when the enemies are very trivial, that seems like that's the only
Goodbye.
real power level you can really use. Shortcuts. Bruh. Combine. I feel like those enemies are gonna be way more annoying in the later floors when they show up paired with other enemy types or something. I feel like you replace B3 with Tails for here. Ia can either target Athlid, Luvobi, or Veil with Otori in order to bounce out damage, and I can always summon the Lion. This is rather annoying though.
guys, bear with me here. Tears of the Kingdom is a phenomenal game. No one needs me to tell them that, but I'm going to be taking a critical and partially subjective look at it today. At the time of this video's release, it's still benefiting from the effects of new hotness syndrome, but I hope we can all be mature and look at a slightly less flattering take than what the majority of online discourse is churning out right now. Considering there's a very successful video out there called Breath of the Wild is Not a Masterpiece that was received quite well, I'd like to think we can. I'm not here to be a contrarian, and I genuinely really liked Tears of the Kingdom. I just didn't fall madly in love with it in the way I did with Breath of the Wild, and I want to talk about why. I have a lot of less than favorable things to say about Tears, but I also have a good number of positive things I will be covering, so please be patient when I'm picking it apart. I always avoid ending videos on downer notes whenever possible, and it's definitely possible in this case. Also, a quick warning. I am going to be talking full story spoilers, as well as briefly discussing one optional subplot surrounding a certain fan-favorite joke villain from Breath of the Wild, but not until around halfway through the video, and I'll give a heads up before these spoilers commence. Tears of the Kingdom may not have set my world on fire, but it's still a 10 out of 10 game, and I definitely think that its best moments are worth experiencing blind. So I do suggest tuning out before spoiler talk begins if you haven't finished the main questline yet. I'd say if you've completed even one temple, you should be safe until then, although there will be some brief footage of all 4 temple bosses. With all that out of the way, I want to start by taking a look at Breath of the Wild, and talking about what made it such a special game to me. 2017 was an insane year for Nintendo. Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild were like the second coming of perennial classics Mario 64 and Ocarina of Time for me personally. I'm a video game enthusiast, but I'm also a critic, and I have a cynical streak which causes me to not always align with the hype. This was not the case for Mario and Link's launch releases on the Switch. I say this with no irony. Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild made me feel like a little kid experiencing those N64 classics for the first time all over again. They are magical games to me. They perfectly capture everything I love about those genre-defining titles while still feeling decidedly more modern. I adore them. They're 2 of my favorite games of all time. And I know that this is a huge cliche in the gaming sphere, but this tale as old as time is true for me as well. Ocarina of Time got me into video games. It is the reason I am such a passionate player to this day. It is the reason games are my favorite hobby, and it's essentially the indirect reason that this channel even exists. I was aware of video games as a concept since long before I played that game, but none of the older Game Boy Color, N64, or even Game Boy Advance titles I demoed at friends' houses made me jump up and decide I needed to own a console. Not even Mario 64. I actually didn't play Ocarina at release, or even know it existed. My first exposure to it came after Majora's Mask was released, and shortly before the launch of Wind Waker. In fact, my introduction to Ocarina was basically a coincidence. It was candidly shown off to me by my sister's friend's older friend one day when my parents were picking her up. It's too convoluted to explain the details. But the 30 minutes I accidentally spent with Ocarina of Time that day were the pinnacle. That game was pure magic to my young mind, so immersive and lived in that I spent hours in the coming weeks just imagining what lay beyond the borders of the Kukri Forest, which I hadn't even left in my brief demo time. I was fixated. I needed to own a console. I needed to play that game. All this is to say, I owe my passion for video games in general entirely to Ocarina of Time, and by extension, the Legend of Zelda series. I love these games. Now let's fast forward to Skyward Sword. I hated that game. Hated it. Didn't even finish it when it first released. I don't even think I made it halfway. Skyward Sword is not a bad game, objectively speaking, but it completely lacked the qualities that I valued in Zelda games. The magic, the sheer unbridled immersion, the lived-in feeling of those sprawling fantasy vistas. Skyward Sword didn't feel like a world or an epic. It felt like a game. I remember in a pre-launch interview, One of the devs said almost verbatim that basically the entire game is like one big dungeon. And at the time, I was thinking to myself, wow, what a bunch of vapid PR speak. But he was absolutely spot on. Skyward Sword is what you would get if you stripped away all of the world-building elements of Zelda and just injected dungeon design into every fiber of its game space. There's definitely a place for that, but it's not what I came to Zelda for. It technically was a continuation of the formula established by Ocarina of Time that had been followed quite religiously in the majority of entries that followed it, but it was the most rigidly constrained version of that formula that I had seen to date. Breath of the Wild, then, was an absolute breath of fresh air, pardon the pun. Everything about it was so fresh and new and different, but it still kept so many classic series staples and elements while reimagining them in an enticingly novel form. Sure, it added plenty of new abilities, such as the Magnesis Cryonis and Stasis Sheikah runes, but what impressed me most in Breath of the Wild was how it adapted all the series' legacy items and concepts. In past Zeldas, even Link's more mundane items, like the bow, are treated with such gravitas, like they're the only copy of said item in existence. Like, Link has to go through half a game and fight his way through a spooky dungeon full of hideous undead monsters just to get his hands on a bow, and a quiver of arrows that can hold like 10 rounds. And this bow is treated like some magical item bestowed from on high by divine beings, and nobody else in the entire kingdom has ever held one or even heard of archery. But in Breath of the Wild, you could just grab a bow off the ground, or a fallen enemy. They're just a thing that exists, and I know it's simple and silly, but I love that. In past games, Link could wield a short sword and one of like 2 shields, but now he can pair any one-handed weapon with a whole array of shields. Weapons like the Viggoron sword, which was also treated with all this gravitas, like no one in Hyrule had invented the Claymore yet, and you had to go on this insane timed trading quest just to obtain, are also represented in the form of a whole arsenal of two-handed weapons. You no longer had bomb flowers or the bomb bag, but you had the remote bomb room, so bombs remained. Fire, ice, and bomb arrows returned as well, and even the boomerang was represented by the existence of a small subset of short sword-type weapons with a boomerang shape and property when thrown. But it doesn't stop there. In the Sheikah Slate itself, you could find other miscellaneous goodies Link had always made use of in previous entries. The Sheikah Slate's screen serves as your map and compass, but also as your telescope, pictobox, and warp system. Link could once again ride horses, but it wasn't rigidly restricted to just Epona, like she was the only able-bodied horse in all of Hyrule. You could tame any wild horse you found, and they even had unique looks and stats, making it worthwhile to tame the small stables worth. What I'm trying to get at here is that Breath of the Wild took all of these pre-established Zelda staples, which in the past had been treated as these one-of-a-kind treasures that were doled out in a drip-fed, rigidly structured, one-per-dungeon fashion, and reinvented them as tools in a toolbox, which you could find anywhere and shift through any variety of on the fly. It took a theme park and turned it into a sandbox, and it was incredible. It truly took my breath away, in the same way Ocarina of Time did all those years earlier. And the fact that it accomplished this with a jaded adult, rather than a starry-eyed kid, makes it 10 times more impressive in my book. Oh, and the break with tradition on Link's new look didn't hurt either. And the funny thing is, Breath of the Wild actually helped me appreciate Skyward Sword more. After I had a couple of Breath playthroughs under my belt, the Zelda I had always wanted and didn't even know, I was able to return to Skyward Sword in its HD re-release and appreciate it on its own terms, knowing what I was getting into. It's still easily my least favorite 3D Zelda, but as the polar opposite of Breath of the Wild, this hyper-gamey Zelda entry with Link back in his classic green tunic and pointy cap was actually a tasty palate cleanser after all these years. And you would think that after this palate cleanser, I would be raring to go for Breath of the Wild's direct sequel, and a return to the format I fell so hard for. But while I definitely enjoyed Tears of the Kingdom, it just did not have that same spark to me. and I spent a good portion of my time with it trying to figure out why that was. It is incredibly iterative, but I'm a big Mega Man fan, and those games are super iterative, almost insultingly so. So what's the difference? Well, for one thing, Mega Man games are incredibly short, bite-sized packets of fun. They never overstay their welcome, so a new coat of paint and a set of levels once every year or two is just what the doctor ordered. But that's the thing, isn't it? A new set of levels. Let's first address probably the only thing that anyone can even think to criticize Tears of the Kingdom for right now. It wholesale lifts and recycles Breath of the Wild's map. Just the entire game world, copy and pasted. You would think with how massive it is that the blow of such a recycling would be softened. Like, nobody's got every inch of it memorized, it's positively gargantuan.
I do.
But for me,
Kinda.
that actually ended up hurting it more. It's so big that when you recycle it, I feel the empty space more. And schlepping across open fields just to revisit places I've spent so much time in already was honestly kind of a chore. When this map was new, every vista was full of wonder. I felt like I could find any treasure or amazing secret at literally every turn. Exploration was fun because everything was new. Everything was a mystery, and everything looked strikingly beautiful. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not insane. Obviously, Tears of the Kingdom added a ton of new content, and I'm gonna get to that and give it its due. But the surface of Hyrule is still the fundamental foundation of this world, and even with the addition of things like caves and wells, and the changes which have occurred at major towns and landmarks, I couldn't help but feel like Tears of the Kingdom was sorely lacking its own identity. It's funny, there was a period of time a few years back where it was like in vogue to rip on Twilight Princess for not having its own identity, and let me tell you something. Twilight Princess has identity in spades. It is not just a clone of Ocarina of Time. Even if it feels like a soft reboot of it in some areas, keep in mind that Majora's Mask and Wind Waker were released between those two titles, so any similarities they had were basically fresh again. But beyond that, Twilight Princess has always felt unique to me. Its darker, more somber tone, fully adult hero, intriguing and layered companion character, wolf transformation, and of course, the haunting and at times terrifying Twilight Realm. Yes, it was a return to traditional Hyrule, but that was after 2 games spent away. Borden Village may be in a forested area, but it still feels totally distinct from the enchanted and child-filled Hyrule Forest. Kakariko Village, Death Mountain, and Zora's Domain may have returned, but they've been totally redesigned, and their respective races have been modeled in appreciably greater detail than the last time we saw them. Even if you're inclined to see Twilight Princess as little more than Ocarina 2.0, I feel the upgrade is substantial enough to warrant its existence, and as far as I'm concerned, it absolutely does have its own identity. So it surprises me that this same fanbase, which was so quick to throw Twilight Princess under the bus for not having its own identity because it's kind of similar to Ocarina of Time, is now turning around and saying things like, Tears of the Kingdom is such a massive step up from Breath of the Wild that it makes the latter look like a tech demo. Bitch, please. Tears of the Kingdom is only standing as tall as it is because it's standing literally on the shoulders of another giant to begin with. For all the people who love throwing around the line, Twilight Princess is a good game, but I don't respect it because it's just copying Ocarina of Time. Look me in the eyes and tell me that you're not holding Twilight Princess to a complete double standard when set next to Tears of the Kingdom. This is the same game as Breath of the Wild. After 6 years of waiting, it really is very much Breath of the Wild again. And for all the changes Tears of the Kingdom actually brings to the table, I have to say, I don't even like a lot of them. First, let's talk weapons. I'm in the camp that actually really liked the weapon durability mechanic in Breath of the Wild. I feel it adds to that survivalist, improvisatory feel of the game. There's nothing more satisfying than chucking a weapon you know is about to break into an enemy's face for double damage on that last hit, and then darting forward to pick up the weapon they just dropped, knowing that because you now have it, they can't use it, and their attacks will hurt less as a result. But even beyond that, I loved the designs of those weapons. A game's aesthetics are extremely important to me. Not its graphics, its aesthetics. Not how many polygons objects have, but how they actually look. All of the gear and equipment you find in Breath of the Wild looks fantastic. Even the weak, early game equipment is fun to look at and has a pleasing design. And once you graduate from Boko clubs and traveler swords to Knight's claymores and Royal Guard broadswords, that brings a whole new set of satisfaction. And it's the same for bows, shields, etc. Breath of the Wild's artists clearly put a lot of care into the visual designs of Link's gear. And Tears of the Kingdom doesn't exactly shit on that, but it sure tries to. Now, I like the idea here. Ganon's magic caused all the weapons across the land to instantly rust, forcing people to reinforce them with other materials. Nintendo did a very bad job showing how cool this could be in the game's final preview, however, and instead chose to focus on its gear applications. I have to say, I was not impressed when they stuck a pitchfork onto a stick or whatever to make that comically long eyesore of a spear when they were demonstrating the fusion. And I was genuinely scared that this was what all weapon fusion was going to be like. Fortunately, Tears of the Kingdom didn't totally sacrifice weapon aesthetics in the way this preview implied. While you absolutely can make garbage like that if it tickles your fancy, what you're supposed to do is fuse high damage yielding monster parts onto your weapons, which in the best case scenario, aesthetically speaking, keeps the hilt but replaces the damaged and rusted blade. In the worst case scenario, however, you have like a big black pine cone sticking to the end of your still rusty blade, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, Aonuma, but if you stick a bowling ball to the edge of a rusted sword and then hit someone with the blade, it's still going to shatter. And regardless, I don't think the aesthetic hit that all the weapons took was worth the added customization for a bunch of stuff you're meant to use until breaking and then replace anyway. Like, my experience was not greatly enhanced by removing those nice-looking mining hammers in favor of gluing rocks onto sticks like a caveman. I'm sorry. The larger issue with this, however, is a mechanical one. In theory, I like that monster parts now have even more utility than they used to, but in practice, this is itself a double-edged sword, because you still need often unreasonable amounts of them in order to upgrade your armor sets at the Great Fairy. And this upgrade process is arguably more important than doing shrines, because in these two games, 3 heart containers with maxed out defense will last you a hell of a lot longer than 20 heart containers with non-upgraded armor. And this isn't meaningful decision making either. It's not about allocating finite resources for character building. It's just a question of, do I sacrifice this monster part knowing I may have to farm more of it later to upgrade some armor piece, or do I hoard my monster parts and accept all my weapons sucking ass to ensure I don't have to grind later? Monster parts being relegated to armor upgrades, but still having a use as elixir ingredients and Hilton currency in Breath of the Wild was the better balance, in my opinion. They still had value, but kept grinding to an absolute minimum. Which brings me to yet another point. For all the new additions Tears of the Kingdom brings, it somehow left some really obvious quality of life and fundamental game design issues totally untouched. You still can't see what parts your armor needs for its next upgrade without visiting the Great Fairy. Flurry Rush is still completely broken if you're good at pulling it off, and combat is still largely too easy because Link can store like 999 apples and 20 plus full course meals in his pocket, which he can eat instantly from the comfort of the pause menu. This doesn't even help to mitigate early game combat difficulty though, because like in Breath of the Wild, the defense stat seems to function in thresholds, such that everything is either one-shotting you if you're sub-10 heart containers and two-shotting you if you are sub-20, or doing a quarter heart of damage regardless of your heart count, and therefore not threatening you at all. There just never seems to be a healthy in-between here. Also, the shrines in Breath of the Wild were very deliberately placed, especially the ones which served as fast travel spots to major towns and points of interest. But because Tears of the Kingdom felt the need to sense to me as they did originally. I swear, half the ones placed by stables make it so that you can't actually see the stable when you first arrive and have to reorient yourself and look around a clump of trees or something. And there was not a single one placed conveniently relative to a great fairy, someone who you're going to be visiting very frequently. I happened to get Robbie over to the Hateno Lab very late into my playthrough, which meant I didn't have a travel medallion for like 80% of it, and spent way too much time hoofing it uphill for like 120 agonizing seconds every single time I wanted to visit a fairy. I also didn't love the new type of Korok Seed subtask where you need to transport one lethargic Korok to his friend's campsite. I appreciate that you get 2 seeds for your effort instead of 1, but I felt like these made up the majority of the Korok tasks I came across, and they were always agonizingly far apart. So when their friend was in the totally opposite direction of where I was headed, I just couldn't be bothered. Furthermore, this is an admittedly petty nitpick, but Tears of the Kingdom made an aesthetic decision around the Zora scenario that really bothered me. So I adore the armor sets in these Switch Zeldas. This is another early entry concept that got adapted and expanded on beautifully in Breath of the Wild. Mario Odyssey too. I never realized how much I wanted to dress Link and Mario up in different outfits, but I digress. My point is, when I play these 2 titles, I really like dressing Link in the regional garb relevant to where he is, sort of like a When in Rome thing. You know, I like putting Link in his cozy Snowquill garb when he's helping out the Rito in the Hebra region. I enjoy donning the Flamebreaker armor when diving into volcanic caves and mines to help out the Gorons. You get the idea. So this is silly, but I got genuinely annoyed that Tears of the Kingdom withheld the final piece of Zora armor until after completing the Water Temple. Like, just let me go full Zora for this set piece. Breath of the Wild let me do it. And if you're gonna withhold any one piece, withhold the helmet, for God's sake. These outfits generally look complete without the headpiece, and the Hylian hood is like Guile's theme. It goes with everything. Withholding the greaves so that I can put on the top and helmet, but have to just swap in a non-matching pair of pants is just tasteless. Oh, and while I'm on the subject of petty nitpicks, can we please stop treating the Hylian shield like it's the shield equivalent of the Master Sword? It's not. Skyward Sword did this, and then it just became a thing, apparently. Look, the Hylian shield is iconic. It has a great design, it's a fan favorite, but it was always a mass production model meant for low-ranking Hylian soldiers and even general populace consumption. You could buy an infinite supply of them in Ocarina for a measly 80 rupees a pop, and it was outclassed by the Mirror Shield. It was indestructible in Twilight Princess, but that's only because that game didn't have the mechanic where Like-Likes can beat metal shields, and the Mirror Shield didn't appear. The Hylian shield was still casually purchased at a general store for a slight markup due to it being the last one in stock. Aonuma, please stop making me jump through these ridiculous hoops just to nab one, and then pay out Link's life savings just to replace it when it breaks. Anyway, after a lot of reflection, I finally figured out what was really bothering me as I re-explored this largely repeated Hyrule. What was really getting under my skin, and even sapping my patience for completing shrines. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom both share an aspect of fundamental design that, come to think of it, actually reminds me of mobile game design, of all things. What I mean is, in both of these games, the act of strengthening Link, the act of powering him up, is almost completely divorced from the act of progressing the narrative. Unlike in older Zelda titles, acquiring new items and power-ups in these Switch Zeldas is fundamentally tied to the act of exploring. Yes, exploring off the beaten path yielded small rewards in older Zeldas, but the big stuff, the dungeon items, full heart containers, and so on, were found by progressing through the dungeons, which the plot organically led you through. I didn't mind this divorce of mechanical and narrative progression in Breath of the Wild, however, because again, everything was new. The whole map, the whole incarnation of Hyrule was fresh and novel, which gave side exploration a priceless amount of intrinsic value. Tears of the Kingdom, on the other hand, just didn't benefit from this in the same way. Every trek back to a familiar locale, even most moments spent inside the brand new shrines, were kind of marred by the sense of, I have to do this again so I can get strong enough to actually experience the new story content in this recycled world. It almost turned the act of exploring into a form of grinding, and I didn't even think that was possible. Also, why do I have to do this like 6 side quest long marathon to help out with Hateno's dumbass mayoral election just to unlock the ability to have CC lower Link's hood? Who approved this? I seriously love the new hood down look, but I spent like a whole ass real world afternoon just trying to accomplish this stupid aesthetic adjustment that frankly should have been an out of the box menu toggle. Unbelievable. And this is exactly the kind of weirdly rigid thing that would have been accepted in old Zelda games, but Breath of the Wild would have done away with for making no sense. Anyway, let's talk about the real new stuff, the actual draws of this sequel. I want to give the Skylands and the Depths their fair due, but in truth, they didn't really do it for me completely either. Let's look to the sky for starters. Oh, look at that, another double-edged sword. I'm sorry, I'm genuinely not trying to be petty, but I feel that the Skylands came bundled with one major aesthetic caveat. You see, it's basically impossible to make well-crafted, gameplay-oriented, geographic geometry look good when viewed wholesale from a distance, which means the price of the new Skyward content is that the sky itself is littered with these massive eyesore hunks of level geometry, just floating around like something I amateurishly threw together in a player-made Disney Infinity map. The Skylands actually look fine when viewed from other Skylands up in the sky, but from the surface of Hyrule, they're an eyesore. I can't think of any other way to put it. They've absolutely polluted Breath of the Wild's gorgeous, flawless vistas. More importantly, however, is that the total game space covered by them isn't nearly as great or visually varied as the space encompassed by the surface below, so I'd hardly consider them a consolation for the lack of a new map. In fairness to Tears of the Kingdom, however, they were not intended to be, at least not on their own. The Depths were the only thing Nintendo kept fully under wraps before the game's launch. Barring release, of course.
Hello? Okay. Don't know. Huh? Yeah, I'm not doing anything. I can do the rest during the long ass break times I have. It's up to you. Sure. No? Whoa, that was hard. I'm just going back to my old main team. I could try Alma. Sure. Sure. Okay. Apparently I'm starting Resident Evil 4 with Mum. Hell yeah.